Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to continue talking about alleged themes in John. As you'll remember from the earlier videos in this series, that means that there is evidence in the Gospel of John of the involvement of an editor, or more than one editor, who was rather clumsy in stitching together the parts of John. Remember, too, that if chapters 5 and 6 in John are supposed to be switched, if they're in the wrong order, that would in fact be an error. Not a huge error, but it would in fact be an error, because chapter 6 begins with the phrase "after these things." In fact, chapter 5, 6, and 7 all begin with that phrase. So even if there are more things happening than John narrates in the gospel that we have, it's indicating that that is at least the order in which these events happened. Okay, so I'm using Gary Burge as my foil, and I'm going to give you a couple of more arguments today that Burge uses that chapters 5 and 6 in John should be swapped, that they're in the incorrect order. Some editor has put them in the wrong order. This is a quote from Burge. Likewise, 7:1 currently follows chapter 6 only with difficulty. This concern for his life, meaning Jesus' life, should be preceded by chapter 5, where in Judea the Jews elect to kill him. Okay, so I'm going to read John 7 verses. I think I'll just start with verse 1, and then later I'll be reading 2 through 5. And after these things, Jesus was walking in Galilee, for he was unwilling to walk in Judea because the Jews were seeking to kill him. All right, now this is an allusion to the fact that in chapter 5, which is just 2 chapters earlier, Jesus has offended the religious leaders by healing on the Sabbath, by telling the man to take up his pallet and walk on the Sabbath, and then by declaring his own authority from the Father to give such orders, which they think is implying, coming too close at least, to saying that he is equal to God, and so they want to kill him. Now, Burge says this concern for his life, 7:1, should be preceded by chapter 5, but it's already preceded by chapter 5. In the book as we have it, 5 comes before 7, obviously. So what Burge is really saying is that it should be immediately preceded by it, that it should somehow be scooched up closer to it. The narrative in chapter 5 where he offends them and they want to kill him should be coming closer to the mention by the narrator in 7:1, that he was spending time in Galilee because they were wanting to kill him down in Jerusalem. Now, why? I mean, the immediate, when somebody says this, you should immediately say, why? Why is this even a problem? It's completely forceless. Why does it need to precede it immediately? Right now, we've got the story of the feeding of the 5,000 and some events in Galilee that comes in between, chapter 6. But any reader or hearer is capable, if they needed to, of remembering, oh yeah, that's what happened in chapter 5. And again, we've got this artlessness of the narrator, which is a mark of memoir, that he's pausing to make this comment. So, by the way, Jesus was spending a lot of time in Galilee, not going back to Judea because they wanted to kill him. And he says it when it occurs to him. He doesn't have to, polish everything to where he says it immediately after that has happened. Why? Okay, again, after these things doesn't have to mean immediately after these things. All right. And in fact, having the feeding of the 5,000 and the speech in Capernaum, the bread of life discourse in between, makes sense in its own way. Because after this comment in chapter 7, that he, after these things he was walking in Galilee, it doesn't actually narrate any further ministry in Galilee. It moves immediately to the taunt of Jesus' brothers, which we'll talk about in a moment here, and his going to the Feast of Tabernacles, in Jerusalem. And after that, it doesn't narrate in the Gospel of John any time that he goes back to Galilee prior to his crucifixion. I'm inclined to think that, in fact, he did not return to Galilee after that Feast of Tabernacles. So the stuff that's happening in chapter 6 is very naturally a part of Jesus walking in Galilee. Chapter 7:1 says, after these things he was walking in Galilee, he was not walking in Judea. Okay, but it's also partly a look back. We're seeing what was typical, that he was going and he was ministering to the people and he was preaching and he was speaking, etc. He had somewhat of a Galilean ministry in between chapter 5 and chapter 7. If we had chapter 5 immediately before chapter 7, a critic could come along and say, this follows it only with difficulty because there is no narrative of any Galilean ministry that occurs in between here. It's just a bare statement without any illustration. See, so these kinds of subjective ideas of what should come immediately before what can be wielded either way. It's not an objective test at all that indicates that 5 and 6 are out of order. All right, the next closeness argument from Burge. John 7:21 through 23 mentions one deed for which Jesus is persecuted, the healing of the lame man in chapter 5. So this is in the same paragraph where he says that 7 follows 6 only with difficulty. So it's another closeness argument. In 7:21 through 23, and this is where it can be good to have your Bible available when you're listening or watching these videos, Jesus is rebuking the crowd, okay? And he's saying that he did one deed and you all wondered, and he makes this comment about making a man whole on the Sabbath day. In other words, he's pointing out that he's being wrongly judged for healing on the Sabbath. So he's alluding to the earlier events in chapter 5. Burge is saying that we need to switch 5 and 6 to put those earlier events somehow, closer to 7, so that when Jesus makes this allusion, it's somehow going to be clearer in his audience's mind, maybe clearer or more immediately accessible in the minds of the hearers of John. Again, this is extremely weak. Even if we go into the historical situation, Jesus is going to be at least several months later, even if we swap the events, even if we did what Burge says we should do and swap the events of 5 and 6, 5 is still going to be a different feast from the Feast of Tabernacles. So there's still going to be a gap of time. There still could be people in Jesus' immediate audience when he makes this comment in chapter 7 who wouldn't remember or maybe wouldn't have heard about the healing of the lame man and the consternation that he had healed him on the Sabbath. So we do this in real life, and Jesus can do this. He can refer to things when speaking to a crowd, and some members of the crowd will remember exactly what he's referring to, and some will not. We do this on social media right now, right? You might tweet about something, or you might put something on Facebook where you're making an allusion, and some of the people who are your followers are going to say, "Oh, I know what that's about. I know what he's thinking about when he says that," while others will not actually know. They'll realize you're alluding to something that happened, but they won't actually know exactly what it was. Now, Jesus makes it clear in John 7:21 and following that he's talking about a Sabbath controversy. He's talking about a controversy about his healing someone on the Sabbath. That's all that his immediate audience needs to know to get the point that he's making. We can also see that there's another instance right here in this passage in chapter 7 where some members of Jesus' immediate audience know what he's talking about and others don't, concerning something else, the fact that the Jewish leaders want to kill him. In verse 20, Jesus has just said, "Why are you seeking to kill me?" This kind of corporate seeking to kill me. And some of the people say, "You're crazy. You have a demon. You're a nut. Who's trying to kill you? So it looks like those people who say that in that crowd, they didn't hear about the fact that the leaders want to kill him. But if you go to verse 25, same scene, some of the people say, is this the man that they're trying to kill? The leaders don't think that he's the Messiah, do they? Okay, so some members of the audience have heard that the leaders are trying to kill him and some haven't. That's how it rolls. That's how things happen in the real world. So there's no problem with Jesus alluding to something that occurred a couple of chapters earlier, which is going to be at an earlier feast regardless, even if we accept Burge's preferred ordering. Again, what we have here are non-problems that are being narrated in Burge's book, that are being stated as if they are problems. And that happens a lot in critical scholarship, where non-problems are taken to be problems. Okay, now we'll go to what I call the snarky brothers argument about verses 2 through 5. I'm going to actually read this. Now the feast of the Jews, the feast of booths, was at hand. His brothers therefore said to him, depart from here and go into Judea, that your disciples also may behold your works which you are doing. For no one does anything in secret when he himself seeks to be known publicly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world, for not even his brothers were believing in him. And these verses come immediately after that statement that he was spending time in Galilee rather than in Judea. So there's obviously a link here, right? His brothers are saying, go to Judea and make yourself known publicly and so forth for the feast. All right, now here's Burge's comment. In 7:3 through 5, Jesus is urged to reveal his signs in Judea as if he had not yet been there, but in 2:23 and in chapter 5, he has already done so. Okay, revealing his signs in Judea. Now, the reference to miracles way back in chapter 2 is very strange. Is Burge suggesting that even those miracles that are narrated in John as occurring at a much earlier time, an earlier Passover, the first Passover of the ministry, that they couldn't have occurred? And the brothers wouldn't say this if even those miracles hadn't occurred that long ago? He doesn't spell it out. I don't think he's thinking this through very clearly. He doesn't even explain why he's bringing up chapter 2. But he's at least implying that the healing of the lame man at the pool of Bethesda in chapter 5 can't have occurred prior to this conversation, because the brothers wouldn't have said this. In fact, he goes even farther and says that the brothers' comment seems to indicate that he had not yet been there, that he hadn't even been to Judea before. Now, that's just ridiculous. That's way over-reading the comment, and I'm not even going to waste time on that claim that it's as if Jesus had literally never been to Judea at all during his ministry. Why would you take them to be saying that? They're taunting him to reveal himself. Okay, but even the idea that he could not have done the miracle of healing the lame man, or they wouldn't say this, is way over-interpreting, and it does not follow from the brothers' taunt. The brothers' comments are obviously apropos of his decision to spend a while in Galilee, which we've just seen mentioned. It just said that in 7:1, that he's been spending quite a bit of time in Galilee. In fact, that may even have covered a Passover. He might even have not gone for the previous Passover. The previous Passover is mentioned in John 6 at the time of the feeding of the 5,000. Or if he did, maybe he just, went in and out and nobody knew he was there. We don't know. But he's been spending more time in Galilee lately. And they're saying, hey, big shot, you should go reveal yourself in Jerusalem at this upcoming feast instead of hanging around up here in the middle of nowhere, up here in Galilee. Go and do it, where there are going to be all these many pilgrims and everything. And then, reveal yourself, that your followers will really believe on you. These followers, these disciples they refer to, that doesn't need to be as close as disciples. The word is used for larger groups, some of whom actually abandon him in the course of his ministry. All right, so they're giving him a hard time. When people are being like this, they are not being reasonable. They are not making a request to do something that you've never done before, to do something where, oh, well, they wouldn't make that request if you hadn't left yourself open to it somehow. No, we see this elsewhere in the Gospels. In Mark 8, in the Synoptics, in one of Jesus' Galilean ministries, he's been doing a lot of miracles. A lot of miracles which could be investigated. In fact, the immediately previous narrative there is the feeding of the 4,000. All right, and the Pharisees come and say, show us a sign from heaven. So instead of investigating all of the signs he's already been doing, they say, show us a sign from heaven. And that's where Jesus says, a wicked and perverse generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to them, except the sign of Jonah. And he refers to his own resurrection, predicts his own resurrection. Okay, so he's been showing signs. And yet that doesn't stop his opponents from saying, come show us a sign from heaven. Now, we know of skeptics who are like this. God needs to give me individually a miracle. God needs to write a Bible verse in the stars. Or just when people are in a conflict, someone will say, well, why haven't you written a new book recently? Or, you have to have, for your credentials, you have to have exactly these credentials that I'm going to spell out here that I've deliberately, gerrymandered to exclude just you. It's not a reasonable request. It's not like the brothers would be saying, oh, wait, sorry, Jesus, we just remembered you healed that lame guy at the pool of Bethesda. Never mind. You already revealed yourself in Judea. Just pretend we didn't say that. Now, they may not have heard of the healing of the lame man at the pool of Bethesda. That's also possible. But even if they had heard of it, it's been a while, okay? And they're using that to give him a hard time. That's just how people are. It reminds me of a joke that used to go around about God's application for tenure. And the tenure committee says, sure, he created the world, and he did this, and he did this, and he parted the Red Sea. But what has he done recently? Okay, like what you might get in rejecting somebody's application for tenure. Yeah, we've heard about all this other stuff you did, but what have you done recently and specifically in Judea? Okay. But also, let's consider that Burge's complaints are actually inconsistent with one another. This is kind of interesting. And it just kind of illustrates what critical scholars are like. He's already said that chapter 5 should come right before the comment in 7:1 about Jesus remaining in Galilee. But that would still mean that the healing of Bethesda, at the pool of Bethesda, took place before the snarky comments from his brothers. In fact, if we switched 5 and 6, it would be even closer in the narrative of the gospel to that. So is that a problem or not? Is it a problem that the pool of Bethesda healing comes before the brothers taught, or isn't it? If we follow Burge's suggestion and switch 5 and 6 and put 5 as close as possible to the beginning of 7, then that is going to retain this alleged problem that the brothers wouldn't have made this taunt if he'd already performed that healing in Jerusalem. Okay? But on the other hand, if we deal with that supposed problem by taking the healing in chapter 5 and putting it even later, maybe during the upcoming Feast of Tabernacles or something, then the comment in 7:1 that the Jews were seeking to kill him and he was walking in Galilee would have nothing earlier to which to refer. Okay, so these suggestions of ordering and these complaints about ordering are not even consistent with one another. And I think this is what D.A. Carson means when he talks about creating more problems by trying to reorder. Burge, in talking about chapter 5 and 6, says, others wish to remain with the sequential problems as we have them. He's referring here to people who don't agree with his claim, and some other critics claim, that 5 and 6 should be swapped. That those who don't agree with him wish to remain with the sequential problems as we have them. But are there actually sequential problems in what we have? I've argued that there aren't. And in fact, I would say that someone like Carson or me doesn't grant that there are sequential problems in the ordering of 5, 6, and 7. Actually, I would say these problems are illusions, and that they're the result of critical scholarly confusion and a lack of common sense imagination, and that their solutions are not an improvement even on their own terms. Next time, I'm going to probably have a pretty short video. It's going to be about a completely illusory seem or aporia, some kind of a problem. That's the word that the critics use concerning Mary of Bethany. So come back for that next time to the Lydia McGrew channel, where we're making common sense rigorous.